and maybe the other side is I see a lot. So like the first time around, people were, and this had its pros and cons, but people were very caught up in things. Like the other, we'll say the other side was very like angry and anxious and wanting to look and all this stuff. And that has its cons because I think it fed the social media energy that ultimately played into the administration. But like now it seems like a lot of people are just burnt out. Like it's been 10 to 12 years of this guy and it's just as like it's just done. Like
yeah.
And that can lead to a type of withdrawal too that it seems like it can also be enabling, or could have that effect in the long run, even if it's not trying to be enabling. Yeah, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, oh, for sure. I know I felt it, and that's again why I took a step back for a little while. I'm still very involved in Democratic politics here in West Virginia, but I had to take a beat before that, and I know I've lost a few people. Like some people are just like, I just can't anymore. That was there was such high hopes, and people really like were traumatized by the election in November, and remain so. I mean, I remember people talking about how they were crying for months in 2016, and I think this was worse in some ways. I mean, I know I said to my friends, I understand nihilism now. Like, for the first time in my life, I get it. Like, I get nihilism. And it was like, that was a bad place to be in. But, you can't stop working and fighting just because you've had a setback. And, I look at, how Black people in the United States have been treated for 400 years. And they, I can't give up. Like, look at me, I mean, I'm super privileged. And so, what am I going to do? Like, whine? Like, no. Like, it's time to, like, pull your bootstraps up and get back to work. So I've been doing that. And, I'm glad I would say I'm pacing myself. But I think people are withdrawn for sure. I think people are also not so much withdrawn, but waiting and seeing what's happening. So, for example, we've had some conversations like, where do you go? Like, if the bulwark, one problem we have is we have essentially a party of crazy people who don't believe in vaccines, who just crazy people. Like, I mean, you can't work with them anymore. And then everybody else is kind of crammed into this big tent right now. And there's a lot of strife because that is not, they can't run a society where like 60% of people are all trying to like share the same space and get the same things accomplished, because we do not have, again, that shared cultural framework, right? We're not in a party so much as we're just like, not that, And so people are going, what do we do? Do we start a new party? Do we glom onto parties that exist and try and like shape the direction? And people don't have a lot of energy. So I think that some people are waiting and seeing and how things shake out a little bit until they make a move. And I think that's fair. I totally think that's fair. I'm not doing that, but I understand why people would do that.
Yeah, this makes total sense. I with what you were talking about some of the resilience in the Black community. One of the first things that makes me think about is one of my friends. So I lived in Chicago in 2016 during the start of that first term, and so I actually the church I went to, one of the like kind of an older elder in the community. He gave a speech, and this was where he was very much alluding to like aspects of this kind of the Black community's experience. He said, we survived Ronald Reagan, we will survive Donald Trump. It was a very like, we've been through other storms. We can do it. And
not everybody did survive Trump the first time. We lost 1 million people.
Yeah. Now, by a cruel irony, he actually well, he did survive Trump's first term, but he actually has passed away, but for a different reason, for a medical reason. But like, he was an older guy, and but yeah, this is the thing. I mean, I think he was thinking about this from an overall community perspective. Like, for him, it would be our community, but I'm not fair. This would be, the Black community more broadly. So I'm not in the R, but I'm going to say R because that's how, because I'm
sure he's welcoming you in if you were there to listen. Then,
right.
Yeah. I mean,
right.
Yeah.
The community will survive it. And
a community will survive it.
What?
It's a community. Somebody will survive it. We don't know what the shape of that will be. But
exactly.
Yeah.
And I also remember, I mean, like, I feel like this is a time, like, there's something you were talking about before that kind of reminds me of this, where you were like, people are like, you were like, sometimes kind of getting people in the environmental space. I'm trying to remember exactly how you phrase it. So I might be saying it's a bit off, but like how this, like, oh yeah, people getting laid off and then getting sopped up by other companies, that this oxygenates. This was the metaphor you used. I do think this, like, in the long-term run, one potential positive of this is a time when the rug is pulled out. And this can be a time when people kind of go back to square one. And this is kind of emotionally what I've been seeing. And it's a hard time. It's usually a super ambiguous time. It's not a time where people are like, this is what I'm doing. This is the solution. I'm going to go charge. It's more of a reflective time. And it's often, but that can be super necessary. We often need to reflect on the ambiguity to get ourselves to reorient and to actually think about what a fuller picture of like kind of what we were talking about in the middle, like the fuller picture of what a better society might look like. Or what are your thoughts? And I'd also love to hear what you're doing as well, because you said that at the end.
What I'm doing? What was the last part?
What you're doing as well.
Oh, so I would say, so the churn oxygenates. I remember years ago talking to one of my professors as well. He was very grumpy about everything changing all the time. He's probably at the time my age now, 30 years ago. And I was just kind of like, change is good. Like, change is not all bad. And one of the funniest, so first of all, I find that the thing about living in these times that I don't know, it's makes it easier, makes it harder, is that it's also funny. Like, everything is so absurd. Like, you gotta laugh. You know what I mean? And so that's kind of good. Like, I laugh every day at something that these people are doing. That said, they're so chaotic, and this is part of fascism. I mean, this is the thing. They do this. They want to keep you all messed up and stirred up and like freaking out and like, oh, and that's the reason why I was just like, absolutely not. I was like, I have now what I call implacable calm. I'm good. Like, like whatever you guys did, like they burnt something out in me, but that thing, I don't miss it. Like, I feel so calm, but they are so chaotic. And they're so, there's many factions and they're constantly like fighting each other. And they typically will actually fight each other before fighting other people, which is when, you see that Steve Bannon, Elon Musk are fighting each other, or, some guy in the Treasury Department is fighting, Stephen Miller. And they fight, there's a lot of internecine warfare. And also we know that Trump, he's really only responsive to the last person who put an idea in his head. And same with Elon Musk. I mean, he's got that diner now. Like, that diner is just hilarious. I mean, if you haven't followed the diner in LA situation, it is classic Elon Musk bullshit, and it's fucking hilarious. So they only go with whatever their last idea is, and then they go full bore without looking forward to it. But my point of that is, there's so much conflict that out of this, I do think some good things can grow, because they're going to accidentally do that broken clock right twice a day. And I can't unfortunately give you an example right this second, but I have seen it. Like, they are so intent on legislating people's behaviors that they're sort of accidentally coming around to some of the craziest, most left-wing ideas. You know what I mean? Like, so, Trump did do the vaccines. He wanted his name on the vaccine, so he did the vaccines. He put money, he gave people money. That's another thing where Obama and Biden fell down. Like, they should have not. They were sniffy about it. Honestly, they were like, "Well, you shouldn't put his name on the checks. That's like tacky." And it's like, no, it's fucking genius. Like, you should put your goddamn name on the checks and keep them coming. Like, and they didn't. And look where we are. I don't blame everything on that, but that was an easy one, and they didn't do it. No, instead they mocked him. And it's, again, every once in a while, Trump comes up with something like, you're like, oh, interesting, okay. I mean, he reverses himself, and you don't know where he's going to land in the end, but, sometimes they land on something that's not terrible. So I do think that there's a lot of, I'm not an accelerationist by any means. I would have loved to have avoided all of this, and I really worked hard in 2024. I was everywhere. I was basically a Democratic Party propagandist. I mean, I really devoted 2024 to like trying to win this. I mean, so that was depressing. But I just would say, so I'm not an accelerationist, but there is something about bringing everything crashing down. There's nowhere to go but up. And so maybe some good stuff will come out. I don't know. I mean, I don't think everybody's going to survive this. Lots of bad things are going to happen. Lots of bad things are going to happen, particularly to marginalized people. Anybody who had any struggles, those struggles are going to be worse, generally speaking. But that said, there is something for us to be saying, like, maybe push some of this back on the states, maybe push some of this back on the communities, see what kinds of mutual aid networks we can create. I do think that there's possibilities for fluorescence to come out of all of this composting.
Yeah, this makes total sense. I hope we've hit rock bottom sometime soon, because we always seem to go a little lower than I think we can go. But yeah, what you're saying reminds me of, and like a lot of this, it's very cybernetic to me. I mean, like, you do a lot with cybernetics. We could have a long conversation about that. But like, I was recently watching like a astronomy, like introduction to astronomy on YouTube to talk about some of the different aspects. Astronomy is fascinating. Like, stars are super fascinating. But like, one video I was watching recently talked about like multiple star systems. And so like, if you have two star systems, there's some that like the one star is huge and the other star is small. So what happens is this star bursts out in energy and it expands, and then it gives the star the energy to the other star. And so this star, and then eventually you actually get a flip where this star becomes super small and this one bursts out. And then this one starts transferring energy to that, and they're in this cycle. And it's like this like weird feedback.
I gotta say, there were two malls in Tulsa, Oklahoma that had that exact relationship. And it was, every time I would go back to visit my grandparents, Springfield Mall would be the new great thing that had the cool stuff. And the other mall was like all, and then like I would go back 2 years later and it was like, Daisy Mall is like bing, and Springfield's all like, and it was constant, So yeah, I love that. Like, that idea that you have this sort of, setting, and people, things are giving energy back and forth, and you can't always predict where it's going to land.
Right. And also at the same time, yeah, exactly. It's a weird feedback loop. You can't predict where it's going to land, but it also can produce a lot of helpful raw resources. So like these star systems, and this one, but also like supernova and all the various star systems out there, especially the really big turbulent ones that explode or get really hot, he was talking about.
That's how you get carbon. That's how you get iridium.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
He was like, it produces carbon and then it explodes, or produces, and iron is another one that causes a lot of weirdness. But like the one he was talking about, produces carbon and these explode. And evidently this is where a lot of the carbon on our planet ultimately probably came from some of this. So it's destructive. But there's always hope after, and it's a bit complicated because it's all in a
Destruction. Yeah.
complicated
Yeah.
framework.
I do like Stephen Jay Gould's writings on these things, and he talks a lot about things like spandrels and, and various, sort of fluorescent niches of where you get, almost like excrescences, and then they become important niches for speciation. So I know we're, going astronomy, biology, but that is cultural anthropology. So we're going to magpie steal from everybody. But it is all connected. I do think, if anybody ever really wants to buy me like a lot of liquor and sit down and record me, I will tell you all the bad stuff that will happen. But mostly I try and focus on the positive, the generative, the creative, the hopeful. And I do think there is, when we take the long picture, which as, again, an anthropologist, and I'm an anthropologist steeped in history, I think it's fair to take that, as long as you don't diminish the human cost and the animal, the creature cost, the environmental costs along the way, because those are big. But there are big swings, big curves, in history. You've heard of thermostatic voting, probably. It all sometimes can feel very immediate and despairing and hopeless. And yet, taking a step back and looking at that big picture, you realize, wow, people have survived this, and they'll survive, like your community leader said, we'll survive this person, life will go on. I do think it's been really instructive. Ross and I have been watching a lot of archaeology, a lot of history. We're huge Time Team fans, like going back and watching all. I used to watch Time Team back in the day. Now I'm like, I'm introducing Ross to it. And I see analogs. I see Trump really reminds me of Henry VIII, like so much. When you start looking seriously at Henry VIII, you're going to see so many resonances with Trump. Some of the big Roman emperors, what happened with them, like how they ruled and what the choices that they made. I mean, Rome is very, very weird. It's very, very weird. So it's not as good an analog, but there's some interesting stuff. And when we look at these historical analogs, then that also tells us what could happen and how to deal with it. It gives us information that we can potentially use in our own lives, I guess. So I would say that's another way in which I look at things, is with la longue durée, as Brodel would say, is that long, complex wave of action and interaction. And, if you think you know where we're going to land, you are deluding yourself, because anything could happen at any time. And so, which brings me to, we still have like 15 more minutes or something. So while I'm talking about that, since you have this sort of particular kind of mind, where do you fall on the simulation hypothesis?
I tend to first view it a bit almost anthropologically as like, here are some kind of weird ideas that certain people, like Elon Musk, he's the first person I think of when I think of the simulation hypothesis. He's not the only one for that, but like,
I'm not sure if he believes in it anymore, though. That's a good question. I know he probably got into chat about that, but I don't know if he does believe that or not.
Right. Well, he was big on popularizing it, and I think for him, whether or not he believes in it doesn't really matter, because it's useful.
Yes.
It's useful to talk about, like, and in that sense, it can fall into a type of what I will call like tech hype, because it's very tech. It's not technically tech, but it's very tech adjacent. Of like, people have incentives to propagate ideas, pretty much no matter the idea behind the validity behind it. I think that, like, I could try in the top of my head to like speak probabilistically, because that's typically how it's phrased, of like, this is more probable. I do think like, and I could spend a while trying to figure out where the issue is in the logic of it from that side, but like from a certain perspective, it's just like, it strikes me as a bit of it's making a type of logical jump, and like there are all sorts of things by a similar set of logic that could be more probable, because if you basically assume an infinite expanse in time and say, oh, this stuff must develop in an infinite expanse of time, there's all sorts of things that also are probably the case. It kind of, in that sense, it kind of reminds me, maybe I'm going to get in a little bit of this is a whole other conversation, and it's a whole other debated thing, but like, you have things like the ontological argument for the existence of God, which basically says, God must exist. And I don't think that's a very good, I don't think there's much, I don't like the idea of trying to prove the existence of God. That's a whole conversation. Philosophy of religion is a whole thing. But like, there's a type of categorical jump I see it making that I think doesn't fan out. And I see a parallel. I think there's a similar type of categorical jump the argument is making. I don't know if that makes sense. From a philosophical side, that's what I would probably say.
It does, and I understand what you're saying. And so so again, being a magpie, I and just for the audience's sake and listening to this, I was raised in Baha'i with a Jewish step family, in a family that was the larger family is like I think every member of our family is a different religion. I'm not joking. Like, I think at least a different denomination. Like, my great aunt was a Christian Scientist. My uncle's Episcopalian. Like, they're all like all over the place. Not a single one of us apparently shares like the same religious, and we all get along. Like, there's no issues. My grandma liked to church hop. My grandma loved to church crawl. And she was originally Methodist, and then she married my grandfather, became Presbyterian. And at the end of her life, she was, I don't know what she was, but she was going to different churches for like really kicks. So when I look at that, I'm like, I'm not religious. I'm pretty much probably an atheist, honestly, at this point, pagan, like witch, something in there. But I do borrow concepts that I think are really useful, like the concept of grace and the concept of the sin of despair. And so to me, I think we're talking about, when I think that the simulation hypothesis has some stuff going for it. It helps explain some of the ways in which things seem very surreal or seem to just not work in a way that is logical. And again, I mean, really, like, when you come across some of these mysterious blips or glitches. That said, I think too much belief in something that's predeterminative, like the simulation hypothesis, can lead one into the sin of despair, because then you kind of say, like, oh, well, there's nothing I can do. You know what I mean? It's fait accompli. I'm just stuck here on this ride, so I might not as well try. And so I definitely agree in the sense of, like, I think anytime you start to get a explanation that is too totalizing, too neat and tidy, you end up creating a box where human energy and momentum kind of slow down or are contained. So I'm not crazy about that, but. Yeah, I mean, I do wonder sometimes, like, did we pop into a different timeline? And that could be a different conversation that we have, because it would be fun to have that conversation. Because I have been collecting, I think they're called, are they apports? There's a word for them. And now I've forgotten what the word is. I usually know things out of time, like not anachronisms, but you know what I mean, like things that like sort of appeared. That would be a fun conversation to do if you watch it at some point. But again, I think where we're going with all of this is just, as individuals with agency, what are we supposed to do, right? Do we give up? Do we curl up and cry? Or do we just, pick ourselves up as best as we can and pick up our piece of the quilt and focus on what we can do, what's right in front of us, and, whatever that is, whether that's, picking up trash on a beach where you are, whether that's, I'm very pleased, I bought one of those little mason bee houses, and the mason bees are using it. I didn't really think they would. I thought it was bullshit. I thought, okay, bees don't use this. They are using it. They built little bee houses in there. whatever you can do in your everyday life right now, I think matters. And I think that's where we should probably just leave it.
Yeah, this makes sense. I think a focus on praxis. Yeah, this could be a time for a cultivate your garden. I mean, to reference that comes from the book of Jeremiah, where they were in exile. That was a very everything is gone and we're just despair. And then the response was,
yeah,
build a garden, build a bird house. That's maybe they didn't really do that one as much, but definitely
feed somebody. If you're busy feeding people, you don't have time for despair, right? Feed somebody, take care of somebody. Right. I'll add to that. I mean, we see a lot of talk about the male loneliness epidemic. You know what I don't see? I don't see a lot of men volunteering for stuff. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it is a struggle. I was, at the American Anthropology Association on Impact. Straight, cisgender white men, really difficult to get them to do service. And so I would say, building a garden, acts of service, this is what people need to be doing right now instead of being up their own butt.
Yeah, and a lot of psychologists show that serving, that having that sense of I'm contributing to something is one of the most significant things in people's well-being. A book like Aging Well, I think is a very good example of that. I'll link to that below. But I think a wider thing is, I think one aspect of this type of disappointment is an emotional manifestation of this. But during times like these, I think people often think they have a certain type of agency. And then this part of the rug getting swept underneath is that they realize that the agency that they think they have isn't, as other powers that be kind of come and do other things instead. This is a time that's very emotionally hard, and that can, I think, contribute to a sense of this is a bit surreal. The place around me is a bit surreal, but also like you need to process that, but also you need to build your own agency in the things you can do, and that usually starts with the small things, like you said. So building a garden, literally or metaphorically, serving, doing these things in your regular life is a way to actually rebuild your agency, which is, I think, super helpful in the reconfirm your agency, which is super helpful at a time when the powers that be seem to take agency away or seem to demonstrate agency that you thought you had, but you didn't.
Yeah. I agree 100%.
Yeah. All right. Well, I guess with that, thanks for taking the time to talk. I'm going to ask one final question based off of this. You built a bird thing. Have there been any small things that you have done in your community that you have found particularly fulfilling? Feeding people, bird, whatever.
Yeah. Well, I didn't build the house. I just bought it, but I put it on my house. It's like a little mini house on my house for the bees. But yeah, I mean, I've been doing a lot, but well, two things. I mean, so I do a lot of volunteering around town, and that includes particularly, I go to the Main Street nursing home. We do little parties for them, and so we do like Valentine's, St. Patrick's Day, and we'll have like bingo and pizza or candy or like treats and stuff like this. We do Christmas and Halloween and the whole 9 yards. And so we come around pretty regularly. And one of my favorites has been Myrtle, who's 106 or 7 as of July 4th. And I've literally fed Myrtle now twice. The first time I was by myself giving her goldfish crackers, and I was like, shouldn't somebody be supervising me here? Like, Myrtle wants the goldfish crackers, which, she's not super communicative, but she's kind of like, taking them out of my hands. And I was kind of like, okay, I guess, hopefully Myrtle knows that she can have these. But, so yeah, in the most literal sense, I'm out there feeding a 105-year-old woman goldfish crackers.
There we go. I guess everyone should grab their...
Do I want to be 105? And I think, well, she's in bed watching TV and eating crackers. And I was like, there's something to be said for that. Like, I could live with that.
Yeah, that's not the worst life. I mean, well, like I referenced the book Aging Well, and there are many, it talks about people who are older and what factors lead to them being psychologically satisfied with their lives. And at that age, people often kind of discover, he talks about it as like a stoic or almost Buddhist phase of life where people kind of let go of who they are and get a peace as their body sometimes falls apart, and they get content in the small things. That's not everyone's experience at that age, but
Sure.
I guess the moral would be go grab some goldfish crackers and go find the myrtles in your community, because to be perfectly honest, they're there.
Yeah. Go help somebody, as much as you can. And so, yeah, I would definitely say that. Now, that said, I mean, again, well, I would definitely say that to men. Like, I'm a mom. I'm a mom. I've been helping, but we need men to join us in that, because women are getting real tired.
And to be honest, men need it too, because we actually get a lot of benefit from it. But yeah, thanks for taking the time, and I guess I hope you have a good rest of your evening.